So, Chris here. Um, One interesting thesis I have is that the IMF and their loans relate to the year dollar future cycle. And just the main point is that, hey, these year dollar future cycles are relevant. And this is more digging into more of like a harder data. And the harder data would be so Euro dollar futures is U.S. dollars and offshore banks, and so that fits kind of the narrative of the IMF. And to get some real world application and just giving more validity to the euro dollar futures cycle, how the euro dollar futures cycle works, the higher it goes, the more people are hedging for risk and bad economic outcomes. So they're scared, and then when it starts to fall or it gets inverted, that's when it's fragile. It's more a time for boom and bust. It's a time for bust in the fragility window, for people to lose money or feel a lot of pain or recession or not make as much. So the thesis is that there's some new research that I've come across. Not that new research that's out there, but this is the debt cycle. So obviously the cycles last 22 years, 1991 to 2013, comes out to 22 years, and the green cycle, the green risk on, is 5 to 6 years, and I've learned that this is somewhat akin to Ray Dalio's long-term debt cycle. And here we could see a representation from Charles R. Frank Jr., Debt and Terms of Aid and Overseas Development Council. So it kind of smells like U.S. dollars and offshore banks. And the shadow banking. And these IMFs, banks, would give loans to foreign countries in dollars, and you could see how the net capital flows start off positive and then it goes straight up negative. And one one thing that could cause that is the rate hikes. So I was kind of curious to do kind of a study on that cycle, and so one time where rate hikes got out of control was during Paul Volcker. So Paul Volcker, he did rate like a crazy amount of rate hikes, and it looks like we got over 10 over 10 around I don't know, let's see, around 74, and then it started to abate, and then it got really bad again going into past 78, getting closer to 80, and that's when it got really high. So whenever these rate hikes get really high, we can expect that people have a lot of interest building on their loans, right? Because usually a loan is the spread between, I don't know if I'm like misquoting this, but the spread between how much the Fed and the Fed funds is additional, plus how much the institution who lent the money in their rate, and those two combined would compound the money for the lender. So that's what would cause a lot of countries to go bankrupt, right? And that fragility window. So that's kind of the relationship, and the thesis is that I'm relating the IMF to the dollar futures and their loans to these countries, and the fragility window in the cycle to this part, the practical. I'm bringing practicality to the chart and the cycle, and real world information to make it more tangible. And obviously these connections are, I don't have any proof. These are just it's like a thesis of association with just the words of what I've been taught about the year dollar future cycle. So I obviously can't verify this, that this is what's causing the cycle to look this way. I'm just pointing to an association that makes sense logically, and it sounds like it's related. So this is more of like a case study, very low level of evidence of evidence-based practice, or just evidence, low grade level of evidence. So just a disclaimer. But I wanted to do an exercise. So if I knew that the cycle started in 91 and I went back 22 years, that would start at 69, and we had 5 years of a good window. So it looks like right around 74. That matches pretty much right here. We had that recession, so we had a green zone all the way up to 74, and then we started to have the Paul Volcker rate hikes, and then we had roughly 4 recessions. One that's not on here is 82. So it's really interesting, just kind of this having this kind of association with Eurodollar futures, because it makes it more tangible and more real when we start to look at other countries and defaults in other countries and just why I guess it's important to look at like GDP or so, and that's where it gets interesting, why the Eurodollar futures is so important. And it's probably because the IMF propped up the Eurodollar futures in some way, which is the US dollar for the, what's it called, world reserve currency. But I just wanted to add some points of context for Eurodollar futures and the cycle that I really look at a lot, and it makes sense to me that these debt cycles, or these loans from the IMF, and then the central bank, and going through their rate hiking cycle in some way, have a relation to the Eurodollar futures curve or cycle, and the risk on risk off kind of appetite. And so if the entire world is going into major negative capital flows, I really want to dissuade people who are for Cathie Wood, just because it's just such a, I don't know, anti-Cathie Wood kind of message when it comes to the fragility window. It's caused a lot of recessions in the past, at least average of 2 to 4 recessions per fragility window. And we've had one, which is 2020, and we're coming up to the peak, probably up here, and we're about to experience some interesting times as we move on. And we had one here at the peak here in 1980, and then in 82 we had another one, and you can see that here, 80 and 82. We had recession. But so it was just some interesting research that I came across, and I wanted to apply some real world context to the Eurodollar futures curve, and just how it's not just some kind of weird arbitrary cycle. It's real. It involves other countries. It's trackable from their imports and exports of just negative cash flow of other countries, and the defaults rising. It explains why people are so they enjoy the idea of the dollar milkshake theory, and it relates to the Eurodollar futures because it's U.S. dollars and offshore banks, and it coincides. It's confluent. So it's something I wanted to share, just to bring more weight to the seriousness of the Eurodollar future cycle.